Hi, podcast listeners. Welcome to the A World of Difference podcast. We have so many guests on this show making a difference in our lives, making a difference all around the world with the expertise that they bring. And yet so many of you are reaching out to me saying, you want more. It's not enough just what we're putting on these podcast episodes for you. And so I am here to extend a very warm welcome to you to our Difference Maker community, where you can join for as little as $5 a month to get all this extra content. Out the gate, you're going to get 30 plus mini-sodes of exclusive content not available for the regular podcast listeners, and an exclusive mini-sode every month. And you'll get exclusive voting power to help us pick podcast topics and more. And that's at our Changers tier. There's 3 different main tiers and then an extra larger tier. But whatever tier that you join at, you will be included in this extra content. And I know that many of you are wanting to go a little bit deeper. And so even though it gets a little wild in there sometimes because of how deep we go, I want you to join us there. This extra content is very special. It means a great deal to me to be a part of this community with you. And I would love to just exchange ideas or perspectives that you have around these different episodes. And that's the place where we do it. So please show up to our Difference Maker community. Give us $5 out of your pocket every month. And I think that you'll have a lot of fun in there because we do. And I would love for you to join us. So go to patreon.com/A World of Difference to join us there. Welcome to the A World of Difference podcast. I'm your hostess, Lori Adams Brown, and this is a special episode for Indigenous Peoples Day. If you're thinking of starting a podcast, I recommend Anchor, and I also recommend starting a podcast because it's tons of fun. Anchor has been a great place for me getting started because it's free. They have creation tools that basically let you record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. They distribute it basically everywhere for you. And you've basically got all you need to make a podcast just right in one place. So go to the Anchor app or anchor.fm to get started. Indigenous Peoples Day is a holiday that may be new to some of you. Around the world, it's celebrated in different ways. Some places refer to it as First Peoples Day, National Indigenous Peoples Day, Native American Day in some states in the U.S. Originally, some places, especially in the United States, called it Columbus Day. In about 1989, I think it was, in South Dakota, they backed a resolution there to celebrate Native American Day on the second Monday of October. And it just marked the beginning of a year of reconciliation for a lot of what the Native Americans experienced as the result of Christopher Columbus and the different colonizers that came to the shores of North America and South America. And it was in, I guess, around 1992 in Berkeley, California, that coincided with the 500th anniversary of the arrival of Christopher Columbus in the Americas. And then also 2 years later in Santa Cruz, California, where they instituted a holiday and changed it to commemorate the indigenous peoples of the area and to sort of start a change in the narrative so that the violent actions that sort of resulted in enslaving many Native Americans and also, sort of the cover-up or whitewashing and changing the narrative to make it look a little kinder and softer in light of just allowing the violent history of the colonization in the Western Hemisphere to be also a part of the story that we tell. Instead of highlighting someone as a hero, Christopher Columbus, who was an Italian explorer, has been celebrated for many years, and on the second Monday in October. And it's just a chance to kind of bring more to light of the history instead of glossing over some of the difficult parts of him, and to not celebrate as a hero someone whose actions led to such a violent history that resulted in much trauma that still exists today among indigenous peoples and particularly Native Americans in North America. So today's podcast is in honor of the indigenous peoples that we celebrate and want to learn from and want to listen to. So as we lean in today, I just ask that you open your heart, your mind, your eyes, your ears, your soul to receive a message that may be different and even counter to the message and history that you learned growing up. And it's important that we hear from all the voices. I'm especially committed to listening to Indigenous people's voices around the world, mainly because I've learned so much from them. And I've gained knowledge and insight into what it means to be a human and what it means to be part of family and society, and even just spiritually appreciating some things, even in the Bible, in different ways by hearing Indigenous theologians express their lens on reading scripture. But even outside of that, just I think it's so important to hear the story of any traumatized people, because it's in listening that we can be a part of helping heal. My guest today is just such a special guest. I'm super excited for this interview. It's just going to really be super insightful just to listen and hear. But by way of introduction, we are going to get to listen to Ricardo, which is his government name, but his tribal name is TizitCoalt. I really hope I'm pronouncing that right, and I'm so sorry if I'm not. I care deeply about pronouncing people's names right, and some languages that are ones that I don't speak, I just don't always do it so well. But we want to honor you with the name that you were born with and given as well. And also, he comes from just a beautiful heritage, both on his paternal side and on his maternal side. So on his father's side, he is Zapotec Yaqui. And then on his mother's side, the tribal name is Raramuri, but the settlers gave that tribe the name Tarahumara. So some of you may be more familiar with the Tarahumara. And so that's his just very rich and beautiful heritage on both sides. And so, like I said, he's a descendant of both of those tribes, and that's just given him a working knowledge of all kinds of things, including local herbs for the holistic approach to healing. And he just really enjoys blending indigenous healing methods and Western medicine so that the best of both worlds can be experienced. I love that, because I know from even living in Singapore, it was just very common when you went to the doctor that they would mix TCM, which is, traditional Chinese medicine, along with Western medicine. And then, we had little shops that we had certain traditional Chinese medicine, like medicines that we used in our family, like for tummy aches or headaches or muscle aches. And so those were outside of the hospital typically, but the blending of those two has definitely benefited my family. So it's super exciting to hear. And also I spent some time learning community development practices in southern Philippines in Mindanao, and we learned a lot about using local herbs and how people would just have these gardens of herbs to provide local and traditional medicines, and just there's a lot of things to explore there. So I don't know if we'll get into a whole lot of that today, but that's kind of his field. It's where he's working in, but we're mostly going to camp out today in just the rich heritage he has received on both sides, and sort of the story that he has to tell that's been passed on to him from his elders, and just the healing he's working through as he is just going to be giving us such a gift today and being very vulnerable with us about some of the things that have gone on in North America that are not easy to talk about, but that's what this day is all about, Indigenous Peoples Day, a chance to listen, learn from history, and definitely not repeat it. But it's in learning and listening and hearing the hard things that we can know what it is we don't want to repeat. And so hopefully today you will learn something, you'll take away some small nugget from his story that will compel you to be a better and more loving listener and to really listen deeply. So welcome to the show, my friend Ricardo. Hi, Ricardo.
Hello, Miss Lori.
Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to be here.
Well, I'm super excited for our topic today. It's Indigenous Peoples Day, which not everybody refers to it that way. Some people call it Columbus Day, but I know in New Mexico, they have made a decision to name it that, and I love it. I think it's awesome. So I'd love for just with this topic for you to tell us a little bit about who you are and like what your ancestry is, where you come from.
Thank you, Miss Lori, for having me here today. My government name is Ricardo Antonio, and my tribal name is TizitlCoalt. On my father's side, we are Zapotec Yaqui tribes here from Zapotec and also southern Arizona. On the paternal side, on the maternal side, my people are of Tarumara, Corte. Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. You have such a rich ancestry and so much to be proud of, so much heritage there. And I'm looking forward to hearing more about it. So I would love for you to tell me what you feel like is special about your people on both sides of your family, and just the culture that you've been born into.
On my mother's side, they're most known for being long distance runners. You get these big marathons like the New York City Marathon and other greats around the world. Yeah, we're always right behind the Kenyan. So
oh wow,
there's definitely yes. So then they run in a traditional garb, taparrabo, and sandals that are made at home, and they're just known to warm up about 60K.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yes, of course, I didn't get any of that on my side. I'm still working with the half marathon, but I'm working on it.
Yeah. What about your father's side?
On the father's side, the Zapotec Yaqui, the Zapotec were guardians of, indigenous medicine knowledge, how to use the earth to heal ourselves. And on the Yaqui side as well, the Yaqui is a very interesting subject. There's northern and southern right along the Arizona border. Okay. And the walls that we have created amongst us as humans, instead of building a longer table, we build walls, right? And so that wall goes right through our reservation. So literally splitting it from Yaqui South or the Mexican side, and then the Yaqui North. And so that's made it really interesting to, for families to even visit each other and things of that nature. But
yeah,
mm-hmm.
I'm sure it has. Well, I would love to know more about, your family and you personally in terms of when Indigenous Peoples Day became a thing. Like, what did that mean to you, and what did it mean to people in your family and others that you talked to?
Good question. Indigenous Day, I believe, is an awakening of the people, to indigenous contributions, replacing just a very horrific, Columbus was, first of all, never made it to the mainland. And then in the name of God and country would proceed to exterminate the locals in a very gruesome manner,
Yeah.
So Indigenous Day, and again, it's one of those awakening things, I believe, where I don't know if we should tear down the monuments and melt them or build a park to where we can visit these monuments and say, wow, well, this was Pol Pot, or this was the Adolf Hitler of the American continent.
Yeah.
So Indigenous Day is a great awakening of the people, and it's a glimpse of some dignity for what the indigenous community has suffered throughout the history of colonization of the Americas, So it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it's exciting. Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Venezuela. Obviously, you know that because you're friends with my brother. But they did talk about Cristobal Colon, and the conversations I grew up with him, thinking differently about him than some of the North Americans did, because I think we had more open conversations about indigenous peoples in South America and in Venezuela in particular, probably. But yeah, I think some people are just now starting to awaken about some of those things. And so, yeah, I'd love for you to sort of, dig more into that whole idea of like your people. And I mean, we are in the middle of an immigration series on my podcast, which I mean, I pretty much always say, unless you're a full-blooded Native American in this country, you have immigration in your history at some point. So,
Correct.
right? And so really it's, people like you who really should speak into the conversation about immigration and everything. And I guess some of the original immigration did come with Christopher Columbus, and it wasn't super pretty. Obviously, that whole initial phase of all of it. And so, as a person of faith, I read about that history and I lament all the things that happened there. And I think it is important for us to pause and recognize that history is complicated, and it's we can honor people for the good parts, but we don't want to gloss over the hard parts. And I just it's a very shameful part of the U.S. history, how things have been sort of whitewashed in a lot of ways. And so, yeah, I'd love for you to speak to that, how that has been perceived by your people. And I do appreciate how gracious you are about this conversation, because I know that it could be very painful to even talk about how your people over time have been treated not well in a lot of circumstances. But I'd love for you to sort of speak to that on behalf of your ancestry and the people that you know, how you perceive that whole initial phase of immigration here in the United States.
Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you. That's a interesting question with many layers. The wounds of an estimated conservatively about 120 million casualties at the hand of the colonization of Americas can bring the extreme numbers, right? This is the greatest Holocaust on God's green earth, unfortunately. The Jewish people suffered about 4.5 to 6 million. The numbers are a little different there, but so you can imagine the great pain that this can carry as well. But from what I am taught from my elders is love and faith, and healing and moving forward, and contributing something to the conversation that will help us acknowledge what happened, so that we are not prone to repeat the same atrocity in history, and kind of what we're seeing now with, instead of building longer tables, here we are building, taller walls. So just to acknowledge that part of history and maybe learn from our natural people from across the world, our, message is pretty similar when it comes to that we is a living planet that we live on, that we treat as a resource, right? And do these things to the planet, and in turn we do it to ourselves. So
that's so true.
We are entering a time of awakening, to where we have access to information if you are willing to see, if we are willing to acknowledge that these atrocities are still happening to the indigenous communities, the Navajo and the Great Four Corner areas, brothers up in North and South Dakota with the pipelines where they're coming and tearing down sacred sites and, burial sites. I mean, this is going on in 2020 still. Down along the Arizona border, they're bulldozing through very sacred sites and mountains and cutting off natural resources like water. So these atrocities are, for me personally, are an obstacle and a work in my healing to not to be bitter, not to be hateful, and contribute healing for us as a people. But when this is still happening today, October of 2020, it's still happening somewhere across America. It's rather unfortunate.
It's more than unfortunate. It's shameful. It's something that, along with other things we've been talking about in my immigration series, people who are privileged, or people who have power, people who have agency and have a voice, have choices. And the choices are to either look beyond themselves and look to those who are at the margins, look to those who may not have power or agency, and look outside themselves. And that's a choice. Or they can choose to stay internal and look the other way when there are hard things happening. And so I think it's important for us to give people the opportunity to listen to a story. And so I'd love to know more about, like, when your people tell the oral history, on either side of your family when they tell the oral history of what happened with immigration. How does kind of that story go, and how do people describe it when you were taught maybe as a child, and maybe how children are taught today? What is the way that they tell that story?
Interesting. You know, me personally, my culture was, we lost a lot of our tradition and a lot of our ceremonial stuff way through the colonization of the Spanish in Mexico, Don Juan de Oñate, Cortés. Yeah. And so there was a lot of, since they couldn't conquer the people as a people, they conquered us through the mind and the spirit by bringing on different things. And now it's gotten to the point where it's almost accepted. I am personally the first to come back to the fire as far as indigenous tradition and stuff like that, because it was lost for so many years. Wow. But again, it's a place of knowledge. We have knowledge of our research. We can talk to the viejos, the elders, the abuelos, and see what they told. And on my side of the family, it was not very pleasant. There were still along the border here of Chihuahua and El Paso, Texas, and along this frontera borderlands. It was always a shameful thing. You couldn't speak your language. You'd cut your hair. You would assimilate as best as you could, singled out as an indigenous man or as a Mexican or a Mexica. So with that colonization of those 400 or 500 years, it was mostly an assimilation of the people.
Yeah. Wow, that's hard. It's hard to, I feel that as you talk about it. And as someone who has not walked in your shoes, I think it's important for me to listen and understand. And the more you share, the more I do understand. And I'm sure that happens with a lot of people when you share the story of your own journey and the journey of your ancestors and your elders. I know that it can be very difficult at times, and there's a lot of stereotypes, even in 2020, about different Native Americans and maybe your people in particular. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that. What are some of the stereotypes that you face and that you would in particular like to clear up?
Wow. Well, it's believed that we were extinct, so we're here, guys. What do you mean? I thought
You're like, we're still here.
We're extinct. I'm like, no, I'm the son of the surviving seed. Yes. There's a lot of it. That's such a broad question, Larry. Thank you. I'm reminded of, for example, here in southern New Mexico, there's state parks, and you still visit these places that on national monuments, it tells a story of those savage Apaches that roamed the land, and so when in reality, it was the natural people being invaded upon, and they were defending themselves. So one of those stereotypes of brave or the redskin or us natives is that, we created or invented scalping, and that was a French thing. It was one of those ways of being able to kills you had in the field type of thing. So most of the native people around the world have probably this in common, that it's about love. It's about cuidando al prójimo, to take care of one another, that we are brothers and sisters, that we're all equal on this planet, and we walk with that great responsibility, So yes, no, we're not ruthless savages, and it really, now I've gotten to a place where I can laugh about it when I read it on a sign. 2020, man.
Yeah, that's painful. That's really painful. And you talked earlier about just in your appearance, not wanting to appear at certain points in your life as if you might be a Native American with maybe your hair, or the way you dress, or whatever. What are some of the stereotypes that you think would have been involved with that?
Well, there was many times where I would conduct business over the phone, and being brought up in this, you try to not stand out as much. And so there's been instances where, you'll do business over the phone, And then when finally meeting these people in person, they're like, oh, wait, wait a minute. And so that's from renting apartments to, going to the bank and charging, cashing a large check or whatever the case to be. Hitting the checkpoints on the way in from Las Cruces to TRC. There's border patrol checkpoints every 100 miles from the border.
Yeah.
And then just getting grilled every time you drive past one of those. It's not even a common occurrence. It's for sure that you're going to get stopped.
Yeah.
So those are some of the things that we've learned to live with and not be bitter and heal from. There is a difference. When it comes to the color of your skin, there is a certain amount of privilege that comes with that. And, and what you do with that privilege. So thank you for this platform and this way to be able to share some of our experiences as natives here in this area.
Oh, of course. It's my great honor. And I have so much to learn, and you're already teaching me so many things. And I think that one of the things that you're teaching me as I listen is just how we can have grace and strength, but it's so much hard work. And I just want to honor you by saying you have clearly done an incredible amount of work on yourself to be able to work at not being bitter or angry, because I think any of those things you mentioned would have been enough for any of us to feel angry about. I mean, I've been through those checkpoints you're talking about within the state of New Mexico. So for those of you who are listening, he's not referring to the border of the U.S. and Mexico, which separates Juarez and El Paso, but within the state of New Mexico, there are even other checkpoints. Like he said, as we were driving to Truth or Consequences, which is a town in New Mexico, and you face multiple checkpoints that are like border checkpoints of another country within the United States. And it is clear, and it's always been clear to me, that if I'm in a car with just white people, we tend to not get interrogated. But if we've ever had anybody that looked probably like how you look, Ricardo, or somebody who might look, Mexican maybe, or whatever, that you do get a lot more interrogated. So it's certainly true that there is a privilege. There definitely is. It's very obvious. So I think that as you talk about your people and your heritage, I'm really struck by the fact that there's probably a lot of trauma that has gone on in your people on both sides of your family. How would you say that you have learned to deal with some of that, like generational trauma that's been passed on to you? Because I know that even as there have been studies done on, for example, African Americans, there's a lot of even genetic things that they've found that have passed on just from generations of trauma after slavery. But in addition to that, the oral history being passed on of slavery to children can be quite traumatic. And so as you have processed as a person the trauma of your people from generations ago, and just personally, how have you worked through some of that trauma?
Through lots of prayer.
Yeah,
God is
a good
God
way.
is good. God is good. God is good. We talk a lot about, and that's a great question, Lori. We emphasize on a lot about transgenerational traumas that lead to all sorts of fun stuff, addiction, you name it. But most recently, the privilege of sitting with elders. And I'm learning that instead of emphasizing on the trauma, we emphasize on the transgenerational healing of those traumas so that we can break those cycles and not, I have a 17-year-old daughter that I love to death, and me not dealing with these traumas that were passed down inevitably will end at the table of my daughter, our sons and our grandchildren. And so it's not easy. We are working with energy that is old as our people are on this continent. Many, 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 many generations of trauma, but as well, many, many generations of love, because we are the result of love. And so we like to look at it that way, where we can heal from it and try to insulate our loved ones from having to deal with that down the road.
Yeah, that's so good. I think that I also relate to that because I'm motivated to work on all my stuff, because we
Oh
all have
yeah.
stuff, right? Stuff we inherit and stuff we do just to ourselves. But I'm always motivated most as a mom in those ways when I think of the generations to come, and I just appreciate how the elders in your community have encouraged you in that way. And um, and maybe one of the good stereotypes that we have about Native Americans in this country is just the idea that you do have an oral history that you pass on, that you come from a culture that does value the generations, and I think that's important. And it's something we can learn from. It's something you contribute to our society as a people, and it's beautiful, and it is love, and it's something we should all recognize in 2020 and every other year, is that we're not just individuals. We really are parts of families. We're parts of tribes, whether we call them that or not.
Yes.
And we're parts of generations of people who have paved the way for us, good or bad, you know? So as you talk, it's a reminder to me to think more in those ways. And I think that is a beautiful part of your heritage that has been poured into you. And I love it. It's so good. We need more of
Mm.
that. But as we talk about that, what are some other things, or maybe the biggest thing that you're most proud of from your own heritage?
Wow. I'm grateful for the opportunity of learning from my elders. There was many struggles that have occurred since the colonization. For example, there was certain ceremonies and prayers that were still illegal till the 70s and 80s, that you could literally go to jail
Wow.
for praying a certain kind of way.
Mm,
So
wow.
I'm grateful for all of that. I'm very honored to be able to have these elders that can pass down this wisdom, these natural way of healing, the plants, the holistic approach of
Yeah.
of one another. We talk about the colonization, and we talk about two key factors. The one is the separation of man and God. That's one of the deep parts of
Mm,
colonization. The second part of that is separation from man. So we
mm,
don't understand that me and you and me and that tree and me and the mountains and me, we are all together in this. We are all keepers of each
yeah.
other. And as I do to you, I do to
Mm-hmm.
myself. So
Mm,
very proud of that,
yeah.
and with them and learn. It's a learning process. It's
Mm-hmm.
a learning process. It's a faith and surrender. Lots of love.
Mm. That's so beautiful. And it reminds me of, because um, I'm a person of faith who follows the Judeo-Christian scriptures, so Genesis is a really beautiful book to me. And I know that people have around the world different stories of creation and how that came about and all of that. But one of the things that I really um, take very seriously and want to take even more seriously and grow into this is just the whole, there was, from my understanding of how things went in the creation, was that there was a moment where the creator God created a man and he created a woman, and he gave them he put them in charge of the earth to take care of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a command to take care of the earth.
Mm.
And we've not done a great
I
job. We've done a pretty bad job, in
Yeah.
fact. um, and we need to do a better job. And I think things are catching up with us a bit in 2020, and some of the ways we've mistreated both each other, ourselves, and our
Wow.
planet. But I think that as I hear the way your people describe it, it reminds me of that, is that we do have a duty to care for creation, to be good stewards of
Yo.
it, to provide it for the generations to come. Because I'm a really outdoor person.
Me
I mentioned
too.
earlier my husband's hiking in Yosemite today, and we just love the outdoors. And I want it to be available for my
Oh,
kids and my grandkids the way that it is for me. We've had a lot of fires in California this year, and so we're certainly aware of it here in the Bay Area. In fact, it's a hazy day outside today, and it's just it's kind of like in our own lives. Some people will talk about in your own personal life, it can be like driving a car. And when you see a light come on the dashboard, you may not know what it is, but you should take your car in and get serviced.
yeah.
And I think some of the flashing lights of haze and fire is, reminding us that we should do a better job of stewarding this planet and taking care of the planet. And it is a very, very spiritual endeavor, handed, from my understanding, by God himself to us to do a good job. And so that is beautiful. It's beautiful that you have learned that, and that's a big part of your culture. I just think there's a lot we could learn from you and what you've been taught as well. I'm interested now, and this is, a lot of the conversation we're having today, it's hard, and I know that it might bring up difficult things for you, because I'm talking about it as an outsider who didn't experience it with my own people in the way that you did. But I know that a lot of the history that we've told our children here in America, that our kids have read in U.S. history books, has not been the complete story. Both for African Americans, that we're learning a lot about this year in the post George Floyd conversation, but in particular for Native Americans, and the way we talk about the Thanksgiving story, and all of those things have been quite whitewashed, I would say, and the pun is intended there. But I would, how, as you process that, as you think about how history has been whitewashed, I would be interested to know, what are some things that we can do to change some of those systems that whitewash the history and the contributions of Native Americans in our society?
Good question. Many things come to mind. The whitewashing of the indigenous people, all the way back from Thanksgiving. It's funny that you mentioned that, because when I first started practicing, I knew that I could not celebrate of that anymore, knowing the true history of what happened. And, stories that are just all misinterpreted, all the way down to a Disney movie of Pocahontas, which actually tells the story of a pedophile, and that kind of kidnapping and stuff like that, where that we glorify in history. That's a deep subject. Where do you start? I mean, I would start by scrapping all the history books and just writing what is. Nobody's looking for 40 acres a mule or reparations, just to write it and to teach the children, because again, in hopes that they can avoid committing the same mistakes that we have, right? But it all comes through truth, through just being honest and looking at these books and saying, hey, okay, enough is enough. And I believe that that's true for many immigrants. There was a time when the Irish and the Scottish, and they were all there was always something. It was the new guys, the Italians, or and the history has been misconstrued. Of course, it's written by the victor, so they're going to make it sound. It was a party in Thanksgiving Day, and everybody sat together and ate a meal.
Yeah.
When in actuality, the slaughter. A whole camp of people that actually had saved their lives. But I believe we can honor as con la verdad, with the truth. And that goes a long way in healing.
It does. It does. The truth sets us free, is what the scriptures I read say. And I find it, even if the truth is ugly, and we raise our kids this way, it's like, maybe you did something wrong and you're embarrassed, you're ashamed to say it. But what does it mean to be an Adams Brown? We always ask our kids, it means to tell the truth, even if it makes you look bad, because the truth will set you free. And there's nothing that creates a prison in ourselves more than lies. And we may want to keep the Thanksgiving story the way that it is, because it just feels nice. But only in knowing the truth will it truly set us free as a people, as a nation. We have to have the hard conversations. Absolutely. We have to look at hard things if we're going to fix them. And so I appreciate that you bring that to light. And it does. I lament the whitewashing of history, because when I hear the history that you're describing of your people, there's a lot of beauty there. There's a lot of love, and there's a lot of goodness. And I wish we celebrated that more. And I would love for our kids in this nation to grow up learning about that more. Yeah. And I would love to know also, just for my listeners, I have listeners all around the world that, some of them may only know about Native Americans in terms of like cowboys and Indians and what they've seen on movies, which clearly is not a great, as you've already mentioned, representation
in the movie.
what it was like. But Yeah, exactly. But if there was one way people in the U.S. in particular could show appreciation to your people, what do you think it would be?
That's a good question. Appreciation to the people, and I believe all indigenous people, again, we carry the indigenous people of the land, the natural people of the land, all move with love, with respect, with truth, with beauty, in our spiritual way, we have but one mandate, excuse me, we have but one mandate, and it's to love and create beauty through compassion of oneself. And that's it. It's to move in beauty and to move in love, as the people have shown us, to be good stewards of each other, to be good stewards of the land. These are all beautiful lessons that our people still teach to this day, but I don't know. Hollywood sells movies with the guy with the feathers and with the bow knife, and that sells tickets. But the message is the same, I believe, for all natural people, and it's just to move in that way, in a good way, in a way of beauty, in a way of light.
Yeah. I know that when I visited certain national parks, they try to often in the national park system, tell us what land we're on and that sort of thing. And I have family on my mom's side up in Canada, and my mom and I did a trip up there a few years ago to Victoria and Vancouver to visit some of our family there. And when I visited national parks there, I just was really struck by the fact that they go kind of they go beyond it. They go beyond what I feel like in the US we do in our national parks, which is to not only tell you who the people were that used to live there, but they refer to
First
it as
Nations,
First
yes.
Nations, which I really like. And then when my cousin who lives in Victoria said, in the schools, in the public schools, they, like in the U.S., we I guess they do the Pledge of Allegiance. I didn't grow up in U.S. public schools, so I don't really know. But in Canada, they will give respect to the First Nations as they start their school day. And I just thought, wow, that's really beautiful. I would love for in the U.S. for us to learn from the Canadians. They seem to have taken a few steps beyond just letting us know what land we're living on. But yeah, I don't know, like, how does that resonate with you? If people could show more appreciation to your people, would it look something like that, or would it look different?
Absolutely. Yeah, I love the story. Thank you. I've met a few First Nation brothers and amazing people, but I believe it's a good start. Yes, I believe in the stories of the Hopi, where they talk about people of all color coming together, the brothers from the east and the north and the south and the west, and to create a more enlightened people. Yeah, but again, we return to the truth. If these things were taught, there would be some sense of identity. There would be some sense of appreciation. Difficult question, Lori.
I know some of these problems aren't easily solved, and they take years. They take
Generations.
maybe generations. Hopefully not. Hopefully we can solve some things in this generation. That would be my hope and my desire. But as we listen, sometimes we get good ideas, but it's always good to like listen to the people that would be affected by those ideas and let the ideas come from the people that are most affected, the ones that we need to honor. And so, yeah, but I did really think that what the Canadians were doing was a little bit beyond and pretty cool. And it even opened my eyes up to maybe ways I could do a better job of listening, finding out, like when I rent a house here in the Bay Area, I was interested in knowing what land I'm on and that kind of thing, things I probably wouldn't have done before I thought about that. And yeah, it's important. I'm just so honored that you would dig into some of these difficult things. I know it's not easy, and I also know that the burden's not on you to solve it. The burden's not on your people to solve it. Kind of the burden is on those of us um, who have been, a part of like power structures that have, maybe we ourselves didn't necessarily create it, but maybe our elders did, our ancestors did. And so I think the burden is on those of us who come from that heritage to kind of solve the problem and not expect people who've been traumatized by the decisions to be the ones making the changes. So I know it's not easy to talk about, but I do appreciate you you giving your perspective, because it is beautiful. And as you just said that thing about the Hopi people, I love it. All the people coming together. For me, I have this image of heaven in my head, that one day we'll all be gathered together before God's throne, all people
Yeah.
from all tribes and nations and languages. And it's so beautiful. I think diversity is a hunger in my heart, because I long for heaven, and I long for the beautiful equality of that. And when I understand more about God's kingdom, some of the most beautiful verses in the Bible to me in the New Testament are where we have Paul the apostle describing these kind of two different peoples coming together in equality. So there's several times where he'll say things like, there's neither Jew nor Greek, slave
Oh,
nor free,
yes.
male nor
Mm-hmm.
female, that kind of talk. Yeah, and I think if he were talking to us today, he would probably say something along the lines of, there's neither, I don't know,
Yes.
Republican or Democrat, there's neither man or woman, there's never black or white, there's no native and immigrant, or whatever we
Mm-hmm.
would use to describe that. We're all one. We're all one before God's throne, the creator
Correct.
God who made us, and on purpose made us with these different cultures and different skin colors. And on purpose, we all reflect the
Ooh.
image of God, because in Genesis 1:27, God made a male and he made a female, and they were
Yes.
both made in God's image. And there was no hierarchy there. And there's no hierarchy in different tribes. There's no hierarchy in those who are free and those who are slaves. When it comes to the gospel, as I understand it, and it's really good news to me, is that we're all the same, and we all get invited into God's kingdom in that way. And so when you talk about the Hopi seeing all these people come together, like, that sounds like heaven
Mm-hmm.
to me. That sounds awesome. Sounds wonderful. And that's why I love even the Bay Area and the diversity that I get to live in here in this urban environment. It feels like a taste of heaven to me. So I love that. I want to dig into that Hopi story, because it sounds
Very
pretty
nice.
great.
Very nice.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It's been just an honor to hear about you, your heritage, and your people. I'd just love to know, is there anything else that you think is important for us to
I
know?
want to just take the moment to thank you, Miss Lori, for what you are doing, for what you are using your platform for, and how you're using that privilege per se, to help heal the nation, of just further educate us as being humans, and brothers and sisters here. So, yeah, I just want to commend you for the work that you're doing and how you're using your platform. Thank you for this opportunity today.
Well, the honor is all mine. Thank you for using your voice and for telling your story, for the way when you tell your story, we hear the voices of your elders and your ancestors speaking through you, and the way they've invested in you with this deep, rich, beautiful culture that calls us to love and forgive and
Yes.
walk with compassion and walk in such a way on this planet as to where we create harmony and love for all creation. I just think it's beautiful, what you've taught us today, and the honor is all mine. So
Un
thank you,
placer, un
Ricardo.
placer.
Un placer. Okay, thank you so much. We will hopefully see each other in
Be
December when
well
I
out
come to
there.
visit
Our
New
prayers are
Mexico.
with you all, and fires and all that, Corona stuff. We want to just, extend our prayers out to you and your family and everybody that's listening to you today. Be well, be safe, stay healthy.
Thank you so much.
Nos vemos. Bye.
You too, Ricardo. Bye bye. Nos vemos. Bye. Wow. That was certainly like no interview I've done so far on this podcast. And I don't know how you're feeling as you're processing all that, what you're sensing at this time. But for me, I just am realizing there's a lot I still don't know. There's a lot more deep listening I'm inclined to do now. And there's more curiosity in me to find out how I can be a better friend, a better listener, more of a support to people like Ricardo, and also how I can be a better mom to train my children, and just in a spiritual sense, the ministry that God's given me to be just a better listener to Indigenous voices around the world. There's just so much I learned today, so much more I want to know. I just, once again, like always in this podcast, this isn't just information that we have in our head to give us knowledge, but with the knowledge that we now have, there comes a responsibility. So I think for all of us, it's just that chance to figure out what is our next step. What is it that we feel compelled to add? Maybe it's something small. Maybe it's just doing a little research on Google about more stories from the Indigenous perspective. I know there's some great books out there, great resources. If we just open our eyes outside of an echo chamber that teaches us history from primarily one narrative, and it's good to dig into the other stories. And we have people alive around us today that we can learn from. And yeah, I that's what I come away with today is I want to learn more. I want to listen way more deeply and way more often, both to the writers who are writing and people like Ricardo that are willing to speak and share. And it's such a gift to me today. I treasure it. I want to be responsible with what I have. And I hope that that's how your posture is today. And if you want to talk about it further with people around you, or if I can be more helpful to talk it through, let's have that conversation, maybe through the Facebook page for A World of Difference, or through the Instagram page for A World of Difference, or however you want to get in contact. If there are ways that we can have this discussion either through social media, or it's more appropriate for you to have with your loved ones and those around you. But I just encourage you to not have this information just sit in your brain and not take another step with it. I just think today it's just such a compelling narrative that we've heard with many, many generations that are still working through some of the pain from a long time ago. And that's something we hold as a precious gift. And so I'm going to be very prayerful about that for all of us, for mainly myself. And I hope that you will pray along with me if you're a praying person. And regardless, that we will all just decide what our plan is for our next step based on this knowledge that we have. Come back next week on our immigration series, our interview with Arturo Jimenez. He is a federal immigration lawyer in Colorado. He has lots of experience with thousands of individuals in Colorado and other states, working with them in immigration processes, from spouse petitions, family immigration, naturalization, DACA cases, visas for victims, and deportation defense and immigration court. He's written a book called Dreamer's Nightmare, the U.S. War on Immigrant Latinx Children, and he served on the Denver Public Schools Board of Education for a while. He's just going to be a wealth of information for us next week. So please tune in for that to hear Arturo Jimenez, and have a great week, everybody. Bye-bye. As we're finishing this episode, if you're thinking, I really wish I could learn more or go a little bit deeper, well, that's what our Difference Maker community is for. I would love to welcome you in to join the rest of us there. Once again, it's only $5 a month to join, the price of a latte at your local coffee shop. You can join at our Changers tier. Difference Makers is a community that really means so much to me. It's very special because each time I have a guest on the show, I record something outside of what we give to just the regular podcast audience, where we go a little bit deeper, and then I post those video episodes in this community and we can discuss them. But also at the very beginning tier, which is our Changers tier of this community, you'll get exclusive voting power and help pick podcast topics that give us, more of what we want from your perspective. You'll have access to exclusive 30 plus mini-sodes that aren't out there for the general public. And you'll get every month an exclusive monthly bonus mini-sode. At our Groundbreakers level, which is $10 a month, you can join and get all of that, but also priority access to submit questions to the podcast. And you'll get an additional 2 exclusive monthly bonus mini-sodes. And at our Trailblazers tier, which is $15 a month, the price of 3 lattes a month, you can get all of that plus also 3 exclusive monthly bonus minisodes, and a patron shout out. So I would love for you to join us at any of those tiers. It'll help you come into this community, be in the midst of all of us other difference makers, and we'd love to hear your perspective. I certainly would. It's a place to engage more with me and the audience around what you like, what you're resonating with, and once again, go deeper with each of our guests. So please join us in this membership community. I would love to hear your perspective and love to share this extra content with you. So show up at patreon.com/a world of difference.